You're about to spend $350 you don't need to spend. That's the average front brake job at a chain shop in the United States right now. And if the only reason you went in was a squeal, there's a better than even chance those pads had thousands of miles left on them. This video shows you exactly why brakes squeal and the $7 fix that stops it. Here's what millions of drivers go through every year. You park the car overnight. The weather's been damp. The next morning you back out of the driveway, tap the brakes, and you get that sound. High-pitched metallic screech. The kind that makes your neighbor look up from their coffee. First thought, something's wrong. Second thought, how much is this going to cost? You take it to Firestone or Midas. The tech comes back with a clipboard. Pads are worn. We recommend replacing pads and resurfacing rotors on both front axles. That's $340 to $380. They're not lying to you exactly. The brakes did squeal. The rotors do look rough, but they're not telling you why, and they're definitely not telling you that a $7 can from any AutoZone would have prevented the whole thing. Brake jobs are one of the highest margin service categories in the industry. Shops have no financial incentive to explain what's actually happening to your rotors overnight. Once you understand it, you stop paying for brake jobs you don't need. So, let's get into it. Before we talk about the mechanism, let's put a real number on this. AAA has studied unnecessary auto repair spending for years. Their research consistently found that Americans overpay for vehicle repairs by billions annually. And brake services keep coming up as one of the main areas where drivers authorize repairs based on symptoms they don't really understand. The Bureau of Labor Statistics puts average per vehicle maintenance and repair spending at over $1,000 a year. A significant chunk of that comes from decisions made in the shop with incomplete information. If you have owned a car in a humid climate, most of the country east of the Rockies, the entire Pacific coast, you have almost certainly been here. If you drive a Ford F-150, Chevy Silverado, Toyota Camry, Honda Accord, or anything with conventional cast iron rotors, this applies directly to you. The short version, if you do not understand what causes brake squeal, you will keep paying to fix something that does not need fixing. Over the life of a vehicle, that adds up to $600, $800, sometimes more than $1,000 in work that was never necessary. By the end of this video, you will understand it better than most people who work in shops. Start with the material, because everything flows from there. The brake rotors on most passenger vehicles sold in the US are gray cast iron. That covers your F-150, your Silverado, your Camry, your Accord, your Grand Cherokee, your Outback. Cast iron is dense, handles heat well, has good friction properties, and is cheap to manufacture. It has one real weakness: it rusts fast. Not over weeks or months, over hours. When you park the car, the friction faces of those rotors, the flat surfaces your pads clamp against, are sitting exposed to open air. Any moisture in the environment starts a reaction with the iron almost immediately. A thin oxide layer can form on a bare cast iron rotor surface in just a few hours. Overnight in a humid environment is more than enough. By the time you start the car in the morning, those surfaces aren't the same clean iron they were when you parked. They're covered in a thin, brittle layer of oxidation. Microscopic, yes, but it's there. When you press the brake pedal, your pads clamp against the rotor and are supposed to grab clean iron through controlled friction. With an oxide layer in the way, the contact is rough. The pad drags instead of grips. The two surfaces vibrate against each other at somewhere between 1,000 and 16,000 Hertz, and that vibration reaches you as a squeal. The Society of Automotive Engineers has published extensively on brake noise and surface contamination, including oxide layers from overnight exposure, is well documented as a primary source of brake squeal in normal driving. This is not mysterious. The mechanism is understood. What it is not is a sign of worn pads. The wear indicator in your brake pads is a small metal tab that contacts the rotor When the pad wears down to minimum thickness, typically 2 to 3 millimeters depending on the vehicle, that produces a continuous squeal during braking that doesn't stop. That's the signal that service is actually needed. Surface rust. Squeal behaves differently. It's loudest on the first 1 to 3 stops of the morning, especially after the car sat overnight or in wet conditions. Then it goes away. The rotors clean themselves off through normal braking. The oxide layer flakes off and contact returns to normal. If your brakes squeal only at the start of a drive and then stay quiet for the rest of the day, you have a chemistry problem, not a wear problem. The two are not the same, and they don't cost the same to address. Before we get to the actual solution, one more thing worth understanding about how this plays out at the shop. A tech who puts your car on the lift after surface rust squeals is going to see rotors that look rough. Light scoring, maybe some pitting on the friction face. They'll measure pad thickness, and if it's above minimum spec, there's no honest basis to recommend replacement, but many shops will nudge you toward it anyway. They look rough. They're getting close, and many drivers, already anxious from the squeal, say yes. Kelley Blue Book data puts front pad replacement at chain shops between $150 and $300 per axle in most U.S. markets in 2023. Add rotor resurfacing or replacement, and you're looking at $300 to $500 per axle, potentially $600 to $1,000 for all 4 corners, all because of overnight rust. Now let's get specific. Generic advice on this is everywhere online. Specificity is what actually gets results. The product you want is a brake-safe anti-corrosion spray made for brake components. The important distinction: these are designed for the non-friction surfaces of the rotor, not the face the pads contact, the hat, the vanes, the outer edge, and the back. The most widely available option in the US is a zinc-based rotor coating. Products like CRC Brake and Rotor Quiet at AutoZone, O'Reilly, Advance Auto Parts, and Napa. Prices run $6 to $12 per can. One can do multiple applications on a full set of rotors. Here's what you need and what you do. Pick up brake parts cleaner separately, around $6 to $8, along with the coating spray and a pair of latex or nitrile gloves. On most vehicles, the front rotors are accessible through the wheel spokes without lifting the car. Clean the rotor first. Spray brake cleaner on the exposed friction face and let it evaporate fully, which takes 30 to 60 seconds. Not WD-40, not a general purpose degreaser, brake cleaner specifically, because it evaporates without leaving any residue. Then identify what you're treating. The flat, shiny surface the pads contact is off limits for coating. Applying lubricant or corrosion products to the friction face reduces braking performance, and that's a genuine safety issue. You're targeting the hat, the raised center section that bolts to the hub, the outer edge, and the vane area between the friction faces if you can reach them. Apply the coating in a thin, even layer to those surfaces. You're not flooding it. Light coverage. Let it tack up a few minutes, then drive normally. If you're installing brand new rotors, some professionals do apply a very light coat to the friction face before the initial bedding process. The coating is thin enough that bedding removes it from the contact area while leaving protection on the hat and edges. For rotors already on the vehicle, stick to the non-friction surfaces only. In moderate conditions, once or twice a year is enough. In high humidity areas like Florida, Louisiana, or the Pacific Northwest, or if the vehicle sits for extended periods, do it seasonally. If you're storing a vehicle for winter, this is a good pre-storage step combined with pumping the brakes a few times before you park it. The whole job takes 10 minutes. One more thing while we're here, pad material matters too. Ceramic pads, which are factory equipment on many newer vehicles, including recent Accords and Camrys, produce less dust and are generally less prone to this type of squeal than semi-metallic compounds. If you're already due for a pad replacement and you've had chronic morning squeal, upgrading to a quality ceramic, Accabono is well regarded, can reduce the problem independently of any rotor treatment. Semi-metallic pads aren't worse overall. They perform better in trucks and higher demand applications, just a trade-off worth knowing. Don't take my word for any of this. NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, is the federal agency that sets vehicle safety standards in the U.S. Their consumer guidance makes a direct distinction between noise caused by normal operation, noise caused by environmental conditions like moisture and temperature, and noise caused by mechanical wear. Surface rust on rotors after moisture exposure is specifically noted as a normal condition that clears through regular braking. The wear indicator squeal, continuous noise during braking, every time you stop, is what actually requires attention. That's the federal safety regulator drawing the exact line we've been talking about. The SAE's technical papers on brake noise categorize high-frequency squeal as associated with stick-slip vibration from surface contamination at the pad-rotor interface. Oxide layers from atmospheric exposure are explicitly included. This is peer-reviewed engineering documentation. The mechanism is known, and the recommended fix isn't to replace the pads and rotors. On pricing, the Kelley Blue Book data is useful context. Brake pads for a standard Camry or Accord run $20 to $60 for a quality aftermarket set. The rest of what you pay at a chain shop is labor, overhead, and margin. That context matters when you're deciding whether to authorize a repair based on a noise alone. AA's 2019 study, which placed test vehicles at shops around the country, found significant instances of unnecessary repairs being recommended across multiple service categories. Brake services came up consistently. AA also runs an approved auto repair network. Shops vetted for ethics, training credentials, and customer satisfaction, if you're looking for somewhere more trustworthy to start. The takeaway from all of this, the decision to replace pads or rotors should be based on measured thickness, not on noise. If a shop recommends brake work and their only evidence is a squeal you've been hearing in the morning after rain, ask for the pad thickness measurement. Ask for the micrometer reading on the rotor. If they can't give you those numbers, get a second opinion. So, here's where we are. Your brakes squeal in the morning. You've been told that means they're worn. You've paid for brake jobs based on that squeal. And the whole time, the cause was a thin layer of overnight rust that the rotors cleared themselves of within the first few stops, and that a $7 can of spray could have prevented. Know the difference between the two types of squeal. The morning squeal that goes away after the first few stops is surface rust. It doesn't need a brake job. It needs a $7 can in 10 minutes. A continuous squeal that stays with you throughout the whole drive is your wear indicator. That one does need attention. Don't ignore it. One question for the comments. What state are you in, and how long did it take you to figure out what was actually causing your morning squeal? Especially curious to hear from people in Florida, Georgia, and the Pacific Northwest. If this saves you a trip to the shop, subscribe. The next one is about the coolant flush method from the pre-Dexcool era that was quietly discontinued, and why the engines it was used on lasted nearly twice as long as what came after. Already up. Click it now.